All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the rest of the Okina Prime access that no one cares about. That being the Velox Prime and the Okina Prime. Are they as bad as we all thought they would be before they came out? The answer is no, but there is an asterisk on that. And we're going to start by talking about the Velox. So the Velox is an incredibly regular, absolutely normal secondary pistol weapon, of which there are many. It has 14% crit and 2x crit multiplier. Why are its crit stats not higher? I couldn't tell you, but it has 32% status and 27 base damage, so there's plenty of things that could be higher about this weapon. That being said, the build for this weapon is this. Of note, right off the bat here, we are using galvanized shot. Now, could you look at me and tell me that, oh, actually galvanized shot doesn't work on, or does only work on, the multi-shot projectiles on the Velox Prime, and only with these elements and yada yada yada, and the million fucking ways that this mod is bugged on almost every weapon in the entire game? Yeah, I'm sure someone's willing to find out that this doesn't work on heat damage or some bullshit. However, the testing that I've done is whether or not this mod is better than Hornet Strike. And yes, it is better than Hornet Strike on this weapon, so that's why it's in here. I am far beyond caring exactly how it's bugged. I just know that all of these mods are bugged on almost all weapons, and it's better than Hornet Strike in this build, and that's the part that actually matters to anyone. Moving on, the rest of the build is, guess what? The mods that we always use. These are the mods that are in basically every single build. This is the slot that gets swapped around to stuff, whether that's going to be a primed, smite expel mod, for those of you that are willing to swap these every other mission. I know most of you, of course, aren't, though. But in this case, it is galvanized shot instead of Hornet Strike. Other thing that's important is the arcane. In this case, we can get heat procs, so therefore Cascadia Flare goes burr. If you are using green shards on your Warframe, you will use corrosive instead of viral. I know that's not surprising. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Build very, very normal. Those are the only notes about it. It's a viral heat build. I know you're all surprised. That will probably, and maybe, maybe change in the future whenever we get the big damage changes. But for now, this is what we use. With that being said, this weapon it's a gun. It's a gun. It's a gun that shoots. It has a unique reload. That's probably the best thing about it. It shoots bullets real fast, and then you reload it, and it spins it around and such. Isn't that pretty? It does have a minor modifier if you're holding it with Protea, but I'll tell you this right now, Protea has no reason to be holding this weapon. The big problem with this weapon is if we look here, it requires MR13, and if you don't have a better weapon than this by MR13, you have somehow managed to miss every good weapon on the way to this weapon. If you do not already have a good kit gun or a Kuva new core or like the Tenet beam rifle that's also the new core, one of the good secondaries in the game on the way here, the MR directly beyond this is the Latum, and also you should be getting Incarnon weapons and stuff by the time you're even thinking about putting a Forma into this weapon. So, should you invest in this or get this when you're MR13? You should get this if you're MR13 and you need 3000 mastery. And should you invest in this? Absolutely the fuck not. Every Forma I put into this was a colossal waste of my time. And it is not going to be useful outside of, I guess it will be a fine weapon to pick in circuit whenever my options are like nothing and this weapon. Because it does perform absolutely okay. We look at it against the usual, which is 225 Steel Path. All of the corrupted enemies, you'll note that it performs absolutely okay. It's fine. This is nothing special. Its reload is kind of long. If I put a whole magazine into these enemies, they'll die. And it's okay. Will this kill enemies? Yes, it does kill enemies. I modded it with a bunch of Forma and with like the best mods in the game. So yes, it can kill these enemies. Slowly. So very, very slowly. It is specifically kitted out to kill them. So if it didn't kill them, it'd be a little confusing about what exactly was going on, considering it's a brand new Prime weapon. And it is absolutely serviceable if you really, really must. If you use it with something like an armor strip, let's say, wow, it looks so impressive, kills these guys instantly, so does everything else in the entire game. If you armor strip the enemies and you have a well-built weapon, that is not surprising. It is the definition of okay, I guess, but you should have something better. Now we can stop talking about it and instead talk about the Okina Prime, which are colossally more interesting. The Okina Prime are the first dual daggers we've gotten since the Neferi, which were what we got with New War, and they are on the very short list of dual daggers that are in the game, period. However, we're going to compare them to their direct contemporary, which is of course going to be Fang Prime. You'll see comparatively, they are slightly better. They're a little bit more damage. They're a bit slower. They have, a little less range, or rather, they're a bit faster. And their crit stats are technically different. Their status chances are technically also different. And realistically, these are the same exact weapon. If you already have a set of Fang that you are invested in and want to do the good things about dual daggers, they're the same. Do not invest the Forma. However, if you have not put all the Forma into a set of Fang Prime, which are going to always be available as they are in Evergreen Prime, these do perform, I would say, very slightly better. And there is some unique stuff that dual daggers get to do now with some of the updates that we've gotten. The build overall, it's kind of, well, it's extremely expensive, but it's kind of cheap for a melee that works that isn't an Incarnon. So there's that. This build does use melee crescendo, and we're going to get into why. The why is Spinning Needle exactly. So Spinning Needle, if we look at its main attack pattern, it has a guaranteed slash proc and a knockdown in it. Both of those are actually very good, especially whenever they happen in such a short sequence of only 3 attacks. The slash proc kills things, goes through armor. We all know how that works. The knockdown is important because the ground finishers on this weapon are actually quite good, and the ground finishers killing enemies procs melee crescendo, which means you can get pretty much unlimited uptime on the 12x combo, which is useful for an incredibly small amount of things. You might think it's going to be a lot of things that love infinite combo, but it's actually a very, very short list because of a few different interactions. Other combos on this, the important thing here is the heavy attack, which is both guaranteed slash procs and guaranteed knockdown. So if they don't die from the actual heavy attack, you can ground finisher them, and they will likely die from that. Now, this attack, there is a guaranteed slash here. Mostly this is just movement for whenever you're doing your blocking forwards. This combo sucks and should never be used. It's got a lift in it, and I almost threw up saying that. Absolutely horrible. Do not hit forward and E at the same time. You will have a bad time. And then your blocking standing E is pretty much just completely fucking useless. Don't ever use this either. The important things are all right here. Do not look at this stuff right here. So yeah, you're only holding E if you're going to be normal attacking with this weapon, unless you are dashing with only the first part of Fey Intervention, which has an impact and a slash proc in it, and then otherwise you are going to be cashing in the large amount of combo you'll be able to build into guaranteed slash procs and grounded finishers once again. Now, the important bit here is that these heavy attacks aren't very good. And what I mean by that is that their modifier is quite low, and dagger primary damage is quite low in the grand scheme of melees. So while you can get like your big 12x constantly always happening, because Spinning Needle supports you doing that with ground finishers, and of course you'll have the Parazon finishers, which will also proc melee crescendo in order to build up that combo, it is still going to be weaker than other good ways to build combo, such as like Azathane on Kalervo and stuff. And speaking of Azathane and the weapons like it, if you are already using a fully built Azathane, the Azathane is available at, you guessed it, Mastery Rank 0, and the Okina are, for whatever godforsaken reason, MR 12, which is unfortunate. These are a weapon that if they were, say, MR 8, I could say is a reasonable pickup, but again, by the time you're getting into like the MR 12 range, where you're like much more actively having to grind for MR, you've probably reached the end of the story. You have access to the Zorus. Like, you're thinking about getting like the actual really, really good melee, like the Nami Solo and Karnan probably, and things of that nature. And investing in a weapon like this is probably very low on your list. So what are the reasons that you might actually want to do that? So with this build, what you get out of it is the basic use of the weapon. Opportunities reach for Tennokai, making your heavy attacks have more range and kill things, yada, yada, yada. But the actual thing is that this is a usable melee weapon, so it's going to kill enemies that you stick it into. They will die. It is just a generally useful build. It's going to build melee crescendo, just through normal use of getting ground finishers and doing parazons, and you'll eventually build it to 12x for infinite 12x combo. And its heavy attacks will deal significant damage once built up to pretty much whatever enemy you point them at. Like, it deals, like, millions of damage whenever you have it built up, and that's pretty good. The other thing that you might be considering, and especially because I have Baruch equipped, is that you could then take that combo and transfer that into an Exalted Warframe such as Baruch. Unfortunately, I'm here to report that that does not work. We can pause the AI here, and I can just show how this goes. If we just hit these guys a bunch and build this up, get a little bit of restraint. You can see I'm at that 7x combo. If I hit 4, my combo's gone. It doesn't use the same bar, and the crescendo stacks don't transfer over, so you can't use it that way. For any actual Exalted weapon, it basically purges all of that combo from you whenever you swap into your 4. I know that that sucks, and that would be a really cool use for these weapons, but unfortunately, that does not work. So what does it work for? Well, it works for pseudo-Exalteds, that being like Korra's Whip and Atlas's 1 and so on and so forth. However, if you have access to literally any of the Incarnins, which will give their stats to those pseudo-Exalteds, such as, of course, the Ceramic Dagger with its much increased crit for Atlas and such, so on and so forth like that, those weapons are infinitely better and are going to be pretty accessible if you're at the MR to even be able to use this weapon. So there's no reason to use them there, leaving only one consideration where you could bring this weapon and have something good happen. That being very explicitly and pretty much only if you are using an outburst build. So, secondary outburst, for those that don't know, this on swapping to your secondary consumes all combo multiplier to increase secondary weapon critical chance and critical damage by 20% per combo consumed for 30 seconds. So, if you build up to 12x through Crescendo, which is very easy to do on literally any Warframe, with the Okina, you can then cash that into secondary outburst for very strong secondary damage. This being useful on Mesa, on Dante, any Warframe where you really want to be using your secondary more than your melee weapons. If you're willing to invest the little bit of time and have a full set of melee Crescendo, you can stack up secondary outburst and basically infinitely use this effect, as it lasts for 30 seconds and it takes much less time for the combo bar to quickly refill to 12x for you. So getting 240% critical chance and critical damage for your secondary is a huge boost, especially whenever you're combining that with like Cascadia Flare, or not Cascadia Flare, but just a build that is meant for outburst. It is going to do tremendous damage, whether you are using Galvanized Shot or a Hornet Strike based build. It will just absolutely mop the floor with things. But yeah, that's the only place where this is going to be used, is explicitly an outburst build, because if you're a pseudo-exalted Warframe, you want an Incarnin, and if you are an exalted Warframe, you can't use these. So they're an okay melee weapon with a hyper-specific niche that, honestly, given the trouble that you have to go through at the beginning of basically any longer mission that you want to do, which is to get all of those finishers and everything, I would still probably tell you that you're better off using the Ceramic Dagger, because that weapon is just going to build up through you getting kills with your weapon of choice that's not a melee, instead of being forced to use your melee for a while. And especially whenever it can sometimes be frustrating to get those grounded finisher kills if you're in a squad with other people who are just killing all of the enemies that you're trying to ground finisher. So how are these two weapons? Well, to show the Okina off just a little bit, because I know that I just kind of paused the AI just so I could exemplify what they were up to with that other example. These are good. Like, you can see that it's pretty easy to just like smash through. Those ground finishers do significant damage. I'm obviously not using Tennokai here, as that would be killing them instead of just doing the basic attacks. But these are really solid. Some things that were on the build that you might be like, wait, that's weird. Why would you be running that? I am running the Radiation and Toxin mod. So I'm running the Toxin Prime mod and then the Radiation Heavy Attack Efficiency mod. And that might be a little odd. The Heavy Attack Efficiency mod is purely because if I'm not using Tennokai to get the free heavy attacks, whenever I heavy attack, I don't want to lose all of my combo, because it does have to rebuild, even though it is forever combo. Whenever you use melee crescendo or, like corrupt charge or whatever, initial combo actually, for whatever reason, doesn't just stay. It still gets used for a second, which, always makes me question why heavy attacks even have follow-ups in their combo where they are actually two different hits. I have no idea why it's designed that way if you're never going to be able to actually cash in larger combo on a multi-hit chain. But yeah, And then once you build it up, obviously I'm at like 8x like here all the time. You can just like heavy attack through a bunch of enemies, and they won't like it. And enemies that are armored, like they're going to take very significant damage very quickly, and they are going to die very, very fast. And of course, the more finishers that you do on enemies, you're going to get up to that like 12x, so on and so forth, or just like, you know, go through Tennokai, and that is going to handle things pretty quickly. It is worth noting right there that you saw the heavy attack does do knockdowns, but some enemies such as heavy gunners and bombards, if they're doing their slam, they actually gain knockdown immunity. So you will not be able to follow those up with ground finishers, but as you saw, usually the heavy attack itself is more than fine to just kill the enemy. But yeah, that's what's going on with the Velox and the Okina. The Okina, absolutely fine. If you like how they look and you like want to cosplay as Raphael or whatever you want to do, they're solid enough melee weapons. They're better than a large chunk of them, but they're also at like too high of an MR to really invest in unless the option is that you like them or that you don't want to do circuit to get incarnins. I guess then maybe you'd consider these for the outburst purposes, or maybe even for your pseudo-exalted purposes if you don't want to get any incarnins. But other than that, the Velox is definitely not worth it, and it has like really no plus points whatsoever over weapons that you should already be using instead by the time you're this MR. And yeah, that's pretty much what's going on with the weapons for the Prime Access. They're not as disappointing as expected, because I expected absolutely nothing. But the bar was on the floor, and they stepped over them a little. So yeah, that's the new weapons. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you tomorrow. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. And also, of course, thanks as usual to the patrons for supporting the channel, especially the $10 patrons: Alex Parnham, Andrew, Arbiter Daydream, Benuven, Plotomatic, Brutus Salazar, Canalathra, Dylan Dworsky, Ethrain, Hafan, James Harsthorne, JC4Science, John Lobdell, Joshua Adams, Luzanth, Malakix Williams, Mikokel, Minty Ginja, Michta, Nerve, Moxidate, Ruby, Sanyu, Skur, Sharp247, Camarilla Wastelander, The Coupon of Death, Tomeworm, Victor Palmer, Waifu Wars, Waldad, and Sarah Fear. And of course, thank you to all of the $5 patrons as well. Your support is extremely, extremely appreciated. But yeah, we're about to get the Dante update. Should be an excellent time. Expect tons of videos to be coming about all the changes and new stuff that we're getting in that update, and should be excellent. And then the tier list will hopefully shortly follow.